Okay, welcome. We're going to model the female Automoblocks passenger. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start a new sketch. And I'm going to make normally it says rectangle here. Underneath I'm going to find the polygon tool and I'm going to use a three-sided polygon. Okay, that'll make all the sides equal. I'm going to constrain this left side to be vertical. And then I'm going to dimension from that side to the opposite vertex. I measured that myself with the dial calipers and I found it to be 0.55. I've got some measurements that are slightly different just because I did measure some of these features. Some of them I'm just going to use what you'll see in the document as well. Alright, I'm going to center this triangle up with my origin, so I'm going to use the coincident constraint to make the center of my triangle match to the origin. And that's it for the sketch. Now we'll just extrude that. 0.30, it's remembering I just started this and restarted my video. So 0.30 was the height of that base. Okay. And now I'm going to start a new sketch on that. And we are going to make an ellipse. Let's see here. Oh, under circle, sorry. And the center of my ellipse will be right here, centered on the triangle. And with an ellipse, it's not a circle, so you don't have this common radius all the way around. So the longer direction we call the major axis, and the shorter direction we call the minor. But I'm just going to go ahead and make an ellipse, and then we'll dimension it. How you dimension it is you just click on it, and basically what direction you pull. If I kind of come between the center and the shorter and move out to the side, I'm going to get kind of half of the minor axis. Now if I come this way, kind of go pull away perpendicular from the major axis, I'll be able to get half the major axis. So that's how you dimension this ellipse. And I've got this distance here. I'm just going to take right off their document to be 0.105. And then the major, okay, half of it is 0.125. So now that we've got our ellipse dimensioned, we're going to finish sketch. We're going to create an offset parallel plane. So under the work plane here, an offset from plane. We'll choose the top of this face and we'll offset it. In this dimension they didn't give you in the document here that I'm looking at. I don't see it anywhere, but I measured it and I found it to be 0.19 approximately inches using my dial calipers. And now we'll start a new sketch on that plane. And so when you look at the passenger, if you get a chance to hold it and look at it, you'll see kind of her legs, really just one solid piece, but it is tapered. It extends, it gets wider as it goes up. We are going to have a second ellipse now on this plane that's offset, but this ellipse is larger. And we will use the loft tool to connect them instead of just doing an extrusion where it remains a consistent cross-section. So I'm going to come grab the ellipse tool again and use the same center, get a major and minor axis, come back and use the dimension tool, and again I'm just going to use their values here. For the minor axis they have 0.110, and for the major they have 0.140. Let me hit finish sketch. Is that, I guess that's the same orientation that they've got in the document right there. Okay. So that should look pretty similar. How we want to connect these and fill in material is through the loft tool. So next to revolve you see some more tools that are smaller. We're going to choose loft. If you just look, loft, it creates a transitional shape between two or more sketches. We're only using two here. So we're going to select our two sketches, our two profiles, and it is going to basically kind of morph from one to the other. Now just going from one ellipse to another where they're very close in size, you don't appreciate the power of the loft quite as much. But if you just play around with your own part file with the loft tool and changing shapes and trying to loft from one to the next, yeah, you can see it's a pretty cool, powerful tool. So when you choose Loft, you'll see down on the bottom, Inventor is always reminding you of what to select, what are the inputs it needs. So right now it says select a sketch. You can select a sketch either in the graphic window, or you can even come over to the browser. So I'm going to start on the bottom there. So that sketch contains the loop I want. All right, and I believe it auto-selected because there's only one closed loop. I can see that turned green. And it's saying select a sketch again. It's not saying now choose a closed region. Had I had a sketch with multiple closed regions, it would have then said now choose the region. Okay, it says select sketch again, so we're wanting to choose the second sketch that we're going to loft to. You can also say, if it didn't bring that up, to kind of say I'm done choosing profiles, then you would click to add to say I'm ready to move on to my next sketch. All right, so then we'll choose the next sketch right here. And again, there's only one closed loop, so it auto-selects. And we want to join. You still have your options to join, cut, intersect that you may be familiar with. Okay, and we're just going to choose OK. This work plane I don't need now because I've got a solid that I can choose from here, so I'm going to hide this work plane. It's still needed, but it's not needed to be visible. All right, and now we're going to start basically, I guess, with her skirt, kind of from her skirt. I think on here, do they call it the hem, kind of where the bottom of her skirt has been cut off, the hem. And so we're going to go from the hem to the waist. All right, so her hem starts right where the legs stop. And we're going to use the ellipse tool again. And the major and the minors are still going in the same direction. And I found my values to be very similar. So I'll go ahead and use what they've got written here. They have the ellipse at the hem. Now they're not giving half the, kind of like the equivalent radius, if you will. They're giving the overall length. So you do need to cut those in half. So in the major direction, it's 0.6 all the way across. So this is going to become 0.3. And then in the minor direction, it's 0.4 all the way across. So I'm going to type in 0.2. Get that back zoomed in here. Okay, and that's all I need there. Now we're going to create our offset plane. So work, offset from plane. I'm going to offset from, and right here. I found this to be quite different, actually. They had 0.36 and I had 0.27. So I'm going to use, they have the distance, the space in between the planes, kind of from the hem to the waist and then the waist to the shoulders, as being very similar. Only the hem to the waist being actually bigger. And when I measured it and you visually look at it, it appears to be definitely the shorter of the two. So I didn't like their numbers there. So I did 0.27. We'll start a sketch here. This ellipse is going to be the waist. Still, the major and the minor is going in the same directions. It is going to be narrower. So we'll dimension. And let's see. What did I jot down? I measured that and agreed with them close enough. So their dimension going all the way across was 0.39. So halfway is going to be 0.195. In the minor direction, they have 0.31. So half of that is 0.155. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and use the Loft tool again. So I'm going to choose Loft. And just so you can choose these sketches in the graphic window. So I'm going to choose Loft here. Okay, and notice down here Inventor says selected sketch has multiple loops. Please select the desired loop. So I want to choose the, because it's got the loop from, the face of the legs. So I want to choose actually the whole thing, not just that, but it's giving me a chance to choose both. And then when I'm done, see, it still has that same message. So I need to tell Inventor that I'm done selecting my loop in that sketch and I'm ready to move on. So that's where you click to add right here. And now it says go ahead and select a sketch again. Or I'm going to choose this sketch. There was only one closed loop, so it auto selects it. It's on join to fill in material. I click OK. The work plane visibility can be turned off. And I'm ready to now go from the waist up to the shoulders. So I'm going to go offset from plane. This distance in this direction I measured to be 0.48. So again, very different from my bottom. I had 0.27 and 0.48, so you can see I very much had different dimensions there. Let's start a new sketch on this plane. Again, it will be the ellipse. I want to make sure I don't get some constraint here. So I'm kind of being careful where I click. I'm okay with the parallel lines, but when I see a green dot, I saw somewhere there, I don't want to click and get, you also see the little point-to-point constraint symbol. I don't want to get that. I don't want my ellipse to be constrained and stuck somewhere. So I'm going to, oh, I think it did it actually, even though I tried to move a little bit. So I hit undo. I'm going to have to start a new sketch again. Okay, the ellipse. And if I'm really worried, I can even just make it quite a bit bigger and then just dimension it back down to the right size. Okay, so for the shoulders, okay, in the major direction, I agreed for the most part with their 0.76 all the way across. So that would be 0.38, half of 0.76. And then in the minor direction, I measured that differently. They had 0.54 and I had 0.42. So half of 0.42 is 0.21. So I'm going to go with my dimension there. Hit Finish Sketch. I'll turn it isometrically. And now we'll loft. I can actually hide that work plane already. I don't need it. And we're going to loft from here to here. So loft. From that face to here. Click OK. And there you go. And I'm going to go ahead and just take a front view look. And if I compare it to my part, I do think that looks fairly proportional, minus the arms. We don't have the arms filled in. But I'm actually pretty happy with the ratio of the skirt to from waist to shoulders. Okay. All right, and then last up, we are going to work on, well, actually, before we do the head, let's see, we're gonna go ahead and get the shoulders to not be flat, but to have that cut across. So I need a plane that's going to be vertical, kind of perpendicular to this, and I do want to come across from the side. So let me rotate it. This side of the triangular base right here is a perfect plane because it's kind of perpendicular to the major axis. All right, so if I kind of extrude or do some kind of feature straight across, right, I'll be traveling in the same direction as the major axis. So I'm going to start a new sketch right here. Now I'm working on this work plane. That work plane actually slices through the body, and so if I want to see the flat area, here's a nice little trick. You can right-click on the sketch, and there's a shortcut keyboard key, F7, but Slice Graphics is what I'm doing. Slice Graphics allows you to see kind of the section view of the work plane that you're working on. So where does it slice through the current model? It's really nice because if you are sketching within this area, it gets all the material that's in the foreground in front of the plane out of your way so that you can see your sketch lines. Otherwise, your sketch lines are literally inside the workpiece and you can't see them very well. So if I made a sketch right here, for example, okay, I can't see that line usually. If it's not highlighted, I can't see it. But if I hit F7, then I can see down to that plane, okay? So it is there, and it is something you can select. You just have to know where it is, and sometimes it's hard to find it, okay? So our goal here is to basically either extrude cut away some material on the top, or the way we did it with the male is we use the extrude intersect. So we created a profile that included the area we wanted to keep, and when we extruded it, we said only keep what's inside this. Okay, so I'll do that again. And so because of that, I'm going to start on I need to project geometry, don't I? I need to get these lines. I need to get some geometry here for me to work with. So I'm going to get that bottom corner, this bottom corner, if I can get it. There you go. And I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to connect those two. Oh, something's wrong. Let's use my coincident constraint to get that point to be locked onto there. Should basically be the bottom segment. And then I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to make one here. I'm going to make one on the other side. And I'm going to constrain these to always being equal so that my sketch stays symmetrical. Okay, so I'm going to use my equal constraint and say that these two have to be equal. Okay, now that didn't keep them at the same angle, but I'm also going to grab a line and connect them. And I'm going to make this line, I'll call it a construction line because it's really just to help me out here. I want these two to always remain at the same height, so I'm going to constrain this to be vertical. I'm sorry, horizontal. I might have to use the vertical tool though because I'm rotated. So let's see, I think I do. There you go, yeah. Had I used, let's hit undo, had I used the horizontal tool, okay, it wouldn't have worked for me. And that's just because horizontal and vertical is not referencing the perspective I'm looking at, but kind of the original front view. So choose that, there you go. Now, I do want to create an arc. I'm going to use the 3-point arc where I define the two ends. And then the third point, I want to be right here at the midpoint of the top. And it is kind of projecting that line enough for help me find that geometry. So right there. All right. Now, because of my constraints, these 2 points always have to stay relatively horizontal to each other. As I move one, the other one stays at the same height. So and these two are staying equal. So I get a nice symmetrical shape. So I can play around with this, and basically what I'm wanting to do is to slice across. I'm going to keep everything inside this region, so whatever is outside of it will get cut away, and that'll create that that rounded over top for the shoulders. And this is just something you just visually have to look at and decide for yourself about what's right. Okay? And I'm just eyeballing it here. Okay, so that looks good enough. I'm going to hit Finish Sketch, and then we're going to use the Extrude Intersect tool. So instead of join or cut, I'm going to use Intersect. And because my sketch plane is inside the part, I really need to go in both directions. So here I can control the directions. I can go in both symmetrically, that means the same distance in both. Or in this case, I'm already closer to one side than the other, so I can do an asymmetric extrusion. And I could try to dimension this, or I can just grab these handles and just make sure that I've included the whole part. And that'll be good enough. Okay, but when I use this asymmetric, I'm given 2 different distances to manage. Okay, because I don't have to go the same distance in both directions. All right, so all of the material that's left inside that profile is left behind. Anything not is excluded. So that's the Intersect tool. All right, there you go. So the last thing we're going to do is create the head. And I did measure the head to get some dimensions. And so I'm going to start new sketch. I do need a plane. I'm going to go back to the origin. And if I hit the expand, I can see my original planes. And because I took the original sketch triangle and constrained the center of my triangle to the origin of that first plane, then these planes are kind of helping slice right through the middle of my part. So I can find one that is kind of a perfect one to draw on. For me is going to be this one. I like going, it's kind of running the length of the shoulders. And so that's the XZ. I'm going to start new sketch and choose the XZ plane. Okay. And now I'll project geometry just in case for that top line. I want to make sure I can choose and reference that. And I even want to make sure I find the middle. So I'm going to just grab the point tool, and I'm going to slide slowly across there until I find the point-to-point constraint. You can see the little gray box to the kind of down and right of my cursor. The green dots don't always appear, so pay attention to that gray box because that is something that you should be able to see. Okay, I'm going to click right there so I have a point referencing the middle. I'm going to make a line that goes vertical. My strategy now is to make kind of half of the head, and then I'm going to revolve it. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and dimension the height of this because I did measure the height of the head, and let's see, I wrote it down to be about 1/2 inch. Okay, it is you know, maybe bigger than you would think. So if you like, wow, it looks proportional, but if you pick up the plastic piece, it's a pretty good size. right? And then I'm going to use arc tools, and I'm going to come back and mess with those in a little bit, but for now I'm just going to kind of get them created. I'll add some constraints most likely in a little bit. I'm going to use the line tool to connect to these, and I'm going to dimension now the distance from line to line here. So that'll define basically the radius of the head. I measured it to be about 0.43 all the way across. So I want half of that. So 0.215. Does that sound about right? All right, and then the arc tools, what I was thinking is I was going to make this arc be tangent here. So it might not even work so great. And let's see, I'll make this tangent to that line. Here, we'll see. And then my arc and line didn't connect here, so I'm going to use the coincident constraint to connect that point to here. Okay, and I'm going to use the tangent tool to smooth this out from here to here. And now I want to really go from here to a horizontal line that I can't reference. So I'm going to extend and kind of create a horizontal line for myself. And I can even right click and just call it a construction line, so it's dashed. I left click to unselect it, and then I can use the tangent tool between this and the arc. I want to make sure that that's smooth, perfectly level, so that when I revolve this, I don't get like a point or a dimple there. Okay, and that's about the right size, so that'll be good enough. And we're going to use the revolve tool. So only one profile auto selected. I just now need to choose the axis. I think that's already selected. Revolves. I'm going to choose accept. And I can color my parts. I'm going to grab the whole part name here. I'll grab a green. You can kind of play around with the shading of the green if you want. And under view, I can get rid of these edges if I don't want to see them, so it smooths it out. I can just put it to shaded instead of shaded with edges. We probably want to rearrange what is our front view. I think this view right here is going to be my front, so I'm going to right click, set current view as front, and then my front top right here, I'll right click and make that my new home view. And I'll hit save, and I'll call this the female passenger. And I'm going to go ahead and find a good place to save this one. You guys do the same, and we're all done.